So, hey, welcome to week 2, which is actually going to be weeks 2 and 3. We're combining those as one unit for a number of reasons. One is this next week is officially spring break, and we didn't want you to have to kind of chime in at all different times and say things. So, what we did is we created this as a reading week, and then next week we'll have a little extended. We'll start actually on Monday evening instead of Tuesday evening. With our posts and our interactions, we'll have a longer discussion. So I think this week is going to be exciting. We're looking at how the times and seasons affect our lives, and Steve's going to tell you more specifics about that and sort of how we'll be going through this week. So, and then I'll see you in just a few minutes.
Okay, so in the first week, we're going to do a lot of individual work that doesn't require us to be. So it leaves you a maximum amount of flexibility for your schedule for spring break kind of stuff. So there's a couple of online videos about exploring time that we'd like to watch, and we'll have links on the website there. Going to ask you to go back and take another look at Genesis chapter 1, and one of the things you're going to see there is that there is quite a bit of attention to creation being played out in spaces and in time, cycles of time and domains of space, and the process by which God first goes about separating things out to create spatial domains of the sky and the sea and the earth. And then the same thing happens with time, and there's a whole bunch of cycles of time. So we're going to ask you to go back into Genesis chapter 1 and look those over for a little bit. Do a reading from Stephen Bauman-Prediger's book on For the Beauty of the Earth that has to do with place and our sense of place, because it turns out when we think in just the abstract and not in terms of the concrete setting of a place, our thinking does some strange things, and we want to ground our thinking and our thinking about God and our spiritual lives in connected to specific places. Turns out to be a pretty healthy thing, we think. Then there's a couple of readings, Cherokee Prayer, and is the other Sun one, is that part of this week?
No, the Iroquois, I think, Singing Prayer will be next week, but the Cherokee story, it's a short story about the sun and sort of our dependence on the sun, or not, how we respond to the sun and the sun cycles.
Cool. Yeah, so you'll read that text and then bring the scripture, Genesis 1, and this text into sort of dialogue with one another. And then there's another little reading that comes from the experience of Celtic Christianity, from a book called Listening to the Heartbeat of God, A Celtic Spirituality. I'm going to talk some about Celtic spirituality and their experience with dominant Rome. I'll put some frame-up notes on the website that gives you an idea of what we'd like, the questions we'd like you to take to that reading, and then finally, perhaps the most important thing is going to ask you to do an inventory of the spaces and cycles that in which your life is lived out. So where do you do what you do, and what are the routines and cycles that your life is poured into? And we're going to want you to take notes as you do that process, because then that's what we're going to discuss and talk about in the second week together. So Randy, why don't you tell us a story about living under the sun?
So I'm going to slow things down a little bit. I realize we're talking kind of fast here. I think it's the nervousness of having the camera pointed at us, and the fact that we're trying to get it all in within a certain amount of time. But these are the kinds of stories you just can't tell fast. So let me slow down for a minute. So this is not actually a story. This is a little bit of a description. As I started thinking about this in my own life, how do these cycles and these seasons affect me? There's a whole lot of ways. And one of those small ways is as a Ketua, we are taught that when the sun comes out in the morning, we used to have a whole lot of ceremonies that went with this, but just the most simplest of those ceremonies is as the sun comes out, or any time during the day, we think about the sun and we think automatically about Creator. We think about Unetlenahi, who is the one behind everything, the power, the being that's behind everything, and the most visible representation of Unetlenahi is the sun. And so, and then that carries on into our sacred ceremonies, our stomp dances, which is the fire which is the sun at nighttime, the representation of Creator on earth. And so one of the most simple prayers in Cherokee is to hold our hands up to the sun and get our hands hot, and then to begin to touch ourselves and to pray for ourselves and for others, and it seems to set the day up in a different way for me when I do that and when I don't do that. So I notice that I do that a lot on the weekends. I do that a lot when I have a day off. I do that when I'm on vacation just about every day. And it makes a whole lot of difference about how I interact with people, how I see things around me. I feel more at peace. I feel more at harmony. I feel like I'm not being pushed by these human-made structures, but I'm more on what I would see as the cycles of nature or the Creator's cycle. And then I realize also while I'm out there, there's other things going on. I hear the birds chirping. I understand the sun is shining on all of them. There's a great scripture that says it rains on the just and it rains on the unjust. Well, the sun also does the same thing. And the sun shines on all creation. And so that connects me to all creation. And so I feel all of a sudden that I have a place on this earth. When I fail to do that, I often forget that I have a place on this earth. I forget that I'm a human being, and human beings have been put here to be in this place, and it's a good place. And maybe I might forget that and try to be more than human, and so more than what I was created to be. And so anyway, for me in my own personal life, this idea of the sun and fire, our sacred fire, is very similar. Sets my soul at rest, sets my mind at ease, sets my life in harmony with the rest of my surroundings, and I actually become that better person who I want to be by taking the time to remember that I'm connected in all these ways. And as that sun rises, or as the sun, I find it sometime in the day, and sometimes I've even done it in the evening at sunset. But it creates a different pace for me than I would normally have for myself.
If Randy's story is about living with a conscious awareness of under the sun, my sort of story has to do with developing a conscious awareness of what it means to live under the stars. So a number of years ago, I became fascinated with astronomy, and at first it was just kind of the look up in the sky and identify the constellations. And then a friend gave me a telescope. It was one of the most significant gifts I've ever received in my life, and it was a real gift to my imagination, and to begin to explore the heavens. And a part of that process for me was going through that, looking out of the night sky and feeling so small, and times of aloneness. But after a while, I began to be able to name the constellations, especially under the summer sky. And I watched them sort of move slowly, be in a little bit different place each night, moving forward through the course of the season. And then I started watching Jupiter and how it goes through a full cycle. It takes 7 years to do one rotation. So watching it move slowly across the sky at an even different rate and seeing some of those other patterns. And after a while feeling somehow, first of all, that come down, that my life is lived out under this amazing universe that God has made, and He's up to things so far above me that I don't even comprehend them. And there's a little bit of humblingness to that. But then to feel at home and comfortable with that, like I've accepted it. I don't demand to be the center of God's universe. I'm just a little thing in it, but He knows me and loves me. Then I had an experience of a very troubled time in my life, going through a divorce, and I took a little pilgrimage over to Germany to be a part of a Goethe Institute. I remember very vividly one night standing on this little berg in this little town in southern Germany, looking up at the night sky and just feeling amazingly disconnected. Right over the head was the Southern Cross. And we Christians, of course, see that as a symbol of Christ. And yet, in the sort of lostness of that season of my life, looking up and feeling like the sky was Teflon and I couldn't connect to it in ways that I had. And a part of that season and the ending of that season, God began to move in other kinds of ways. And then I remember the sort of recovery of that sense, what a gift it was to be able to walk out of the night sky and to feel a sense of connection, a part of the created order, and that to be on the night sky was not a terrifying thing, making me feel my smallness, but somehow just accepting that position and living in creation in that way. And as I began to develop that awareness, I noticed that it stays with you. I need a dosage of that once a week or something. But then that each day, as I continue to sort of live in that awareness, you've created a different universe, a different understanding, living before God in that kind of a way.
Great. Yeah. So I guess that's probably enough for this week for them to get started. We're really interested to find out, what kinds of things you discover about yourself and your own life and how you relate to the times and seasons, and we look forward to hearing about them next week.
Great.